Leadership, it's a skill that can be learned, honed, and shaped. So how do you become a better leader? Leadership expert Brent Robertson sat down with Veronica Garcia to share his experience and advice on how he's been able to guide several organizations to rediscover the leadership potential that exists in everyone.
There's this notion of leadership, especially for people that sort of come up through an organization and find themselves in a leadership position, that leadership is about how much can I do? And there's a limit to that, right? Before you are completely exhausted. Really what I see is sort of the next stage of leadership is not so much how much I can get done, it's how much more can I be for those around me that enables them to step into themselves in a bigger way. And so I find that these ideas of purpose and why am I leading and what am I bringing into my leadership, we need to step beyond sort of the assumed ideas of, well, it's how much I know and how much I can get done. Where leadership really gets interesting is when we bring in the dimension of, well, what do I imagine is possible and what is my purpose?
So in that case, how do you build the heart of the leader and the spirit?
One of the things to think about is that to do so, you simply need to bring more of what you already are. And again, more of who you are, not what you know and how much you can do. So our work is about creating a space in which we can be freed to be able to speak to those things, the things that we don't get a chance to speak to, our imaginations, our consciousness. What is it we believe in? What is it that we see in the world? We tend to think that this calcified notion of leadership is simply, I need to have the answer and I need to know. If we want to have any chance of stepping into the future for ourselves or for our teams, we need to step into beyond what we know, into the domain where we have to act even though we don't know what to do, but we've got to do something anyway. That's how it is to be leading in the future, and it requires more of us.
I love this topic because I even want to know how to become a better leader. How do I do it?
You know, one of the things I find interesting is that it's all about what reference point we use. And I think the natural thing is to use somebody else's reference point. What's the latest leadership book I read? Who are leaders I idolize or see and I want to mimic what they're doing? And so we spend a lot of energy looking on the outside. Where it is, it's already in us. My mentor, Mel Toomey, speaks to it as leadership is a unique expression of the leader. It is an art form because it's about you and your own individual way of being in the world is what leadership is like. And unlike management that can be taught in a book, leadership can only be developed through experience. And the experience of expressing yourself, the experience of what is it that your leadership allows for, understanding like how do I amplify my effect. It's all about discovering what's already inside and being able to use that and to tailor it based on what's going on in any given environment to produce the effect that you're looking for. What's interesting about it too is it allows us to connect to the things that we value, because values, when you're leading, are the principles in which you hone your behaviors on. And so if you don't understand what your values are, you can be leading in quite dangerous ways. And so it's all about, am I leading, am I causing effect, and am I living the values that I believe in as a human being? If those things are all present, right, those deeper things we know about ourselves, then we can be really effective at leadership and being a really amazing human being at the same time.
Mm-hmm. We know many leaders. What is unique about your leadership?
Not having the answer. One of the things that, the first criteria that we filter whether or not we take on a client is, are they willing to be contributed to? Are they willing to set aside that they don't know the answer and be curious? If you're curious and you're seeking and you're pursuing something, then it's not about having the answer, it's about going and finding it and finding others that want to come find it with you. That's where it gets really interesting. What
is the most effective daily habit that you possess?
Wow. You know, so I'll speak just for me personally, is rigor and discipline are critical and your own development is critical. Meaning that every step you take in getting reliable for some new thing that you want to be doing is an opportunity to then discover the next new thing. But this idea of having, for me, I have a recipe that I know that if I follow in the morning, for example, that no matter what happens that day, I'm going to be okay. And it's a matter of how reliable am I for following the recipe, right? I get up before the sun is up. I run. I meditate. I have my coffee, I check in with my family, and then I go to work. If those things can happen for me, then I know it's going to be okay. And how do I make those non-negotiable? So for any leader, it's like knowing what you need to be at your best and just making those things non-negotiable, which is really hard as a leader because you have more and more calls for your time. How do I make those things non-negotiable? Because if I don't take care of myself, right, how can I possibly be effective for others?
What will be the last message for our new generation? What will be the secret to success?
Take yourself seriously. You've got a lot of people out in the world right now focused on making room for the promises of the generations that are coming. We weren't able to accomplish, I think, what we all hoped. And so it's up to the next generation to really step in and take themselves seriously. But just to know that there's a lot of people out there trying to dismantle as much of the existing infrastructure that's no longer needed to make room for the promise of the future. We need it.
What will be the difference in leadership and management?
That's an incredibly great question because I think we tend to collapse the two and we use them interchangeably. And when we do, leadership and management, it's really hard to understand how to navigate an organization. Now, what I'm about to say isn't the truth, it just is useful. Management could be considered a science. Its job is to make things reliable and certain and predictable. Right? It's all about consistency and creating value in the world, right? And a lot of organizations look at how close are we managing ourselves within operating tolerances that are acceptable. That's great, right? And continuous improvement is about finessing that science to get a narrower and narrower tolerances for how we operate, right? Look at the iPhone. It lives up to tolerances that we've never seen before, and it's made in 17 countries. That is management science at its ultimate best. But what happens when we don't want iPhones anymore? Where is the new thinking going to come from that is going to disrupt that reliability and predictability? So if we think about the world through a management lens, when something flies outside of that operating tolerance, we consider it a problem. Leadership would look at that and say, that's an opportunity because there's something that didn't fit. What is that thing that didn't fit? What is it calling for? Is there an opportunity to create something that's never existed before? So leadership is all about conjuring our imaginations to bring into existence something we've never seen, find application for it, and then bring it into a management science mindset where we can actually create reliable value out of it. And if we don't understand the distinction between the two, they're completely different conversations. We wind up getting frustrated because we'll have conversations, let's say, a brainstorming session about innovation. And you've got some people in the room that just like, well, I don't know, that won't work, it won't work, and here's why, and all that. Well, that's management thinking. Leadership thinking is saying, well, what about this and what about that, throwing these ideas out there. If we're intentional, we can shift everyone to say, you know what, let's forget about how real it will be to make this. Let's just talk about what could be. Okay, now that we talked about what could be, let's look at what of these might be really interesting ideas to maybe prototype with. And you can bring it down into a conversation to say, okay, now we need to turn it into something that's bulletproof. Because if it isn't bulletproof, we can't sell it. And then we can bring it into that really scientific conversation of management. But when we collapse those things, we wind up in these upsetting conversations where so-and-so is a stick in the mud because they keep telling me why it won't work. Or the folks over here are looking at the leaders going, wait a minute, they're off the rails. They don't know what they're talking about. They're crazy. These ideas are nuts. If we could just hold those as distinct kinds of conversations, it allows us to navigate between them in a really savvy way.